I'm the Executive Director for Pacific Flying Club, and I've been here for almost 35 years. I always had the great dream of aviation. I was going to go to the, to the big show. I was going to go to the airlines, and I thought that was going to be the way for, that was going to be my aviation career. That was sort of the dream. And when I got started flight training, because in the late 80s there was nothing going on in aviation, so it was really slow. So there was no jobs. I looked around. I went on a road trip and visited a whole bunch of operators, and everybody basically said, "Oh no, go see so and so." So I spent a lot of time going and visiting the next operator, and they all really had the same story. So I came back and I was a little bit like, okay, so now what am I going to do? So I got into flight training and got my hours, got my airline transport rating, and that just seemed to really be where I wanted to be. It was a lot of fun. I liked training people. I liked the idea that people were excited to come out and learn how to fly. Looking back, I probably wouldn't have chose it initially, but looking back at it now, I'd go, yeah, this was the best career that I could possibly have. So I started as a line instructor, and I've progressed to the executive director here. And, so there's been a lot of changes with that over the years. So as I progressed along, I got other responsibilities. I take care of our maintenance department as well. Originally, I went to school to become an aircraft mechanic. So when I did that, it was, just out of high school, went to BCIT, which at that time, actually it was PVI, which did the maintenance program, and BCIT, when I graduated, had taken over the program. So I actually graduated from BCIT, but I actually joined what was called Pacific Vocational Institute and did the maintenance program there. And I'd already got my PPL before that, and then I sort of was at the crossroads. Do I work and become an aircraft mechanic, or do I continue on with my flying? And I really had that passion. I really loved flying. It's the manipulating the aircraft. It's just, people say that they like the scenery. The scenery is great, don't get me wrong. But unless you're going somewhere different every day, the scenery is pretty much the same. Day to day, that view isn't what's drawing me to aviation. It's that manipulating the aircraft, being in control of that flying object. So instructing is a lot of a thinking game. It isn't just a matter that I can fly the airplane. I have to actually be able to make somebody else fly the airplane. Some people just really had that passion for aviation. Sometimes they were coming because somebody else, their dad was a pilot and wanted them to be a pilot. And you took a bit of a different, you had to take a bit of a different attack with people that have different motivations. If I'm just passionate, tumbling over myself to actually fly an airplane, then that is relatively easy. When I get to the point of, having to sort of coach them along, okay, come on, let's do this, that becomes a little bit more difficult. But that was, again, some of the challenges. And I can remember going into Boston Bar, and we were doing a mountain check, and it was one of my students. He was my PPL student, and now he's my CPL student. And when we took off from Boston Bar, we were doing a soft field takeoff. And he did a beautiful initial part of the soft field takeoff, but he wouldn't lower the nose for whatever reason. And I'm saying to him, lower the nose. And then my voice is going up a little bit more, lower the nose. And finally I took control and lowered the nose. And I remember his eyes just were huge, and he's just staring straight ahead at the trees as we're accelerating towards the trees. Of course, once we had enough speed, we were able to just, go up over the trees, and that was fine. And I remember saying to him, so what happened there? And he's like, I saw the trees and I froze, and there was nothing I could do. And I said, really? And so it was interesting. He was one of my students who was more interested in building airplanes than he was in flying them. So the flying, I'm sure, over the years has done very well for him because he understands that whole side, but his passion was in aeronautical engineering. I can remember having students that said to me, I had one student who said, I can only come one day a week. And I said to him, oh, this is going to take a really long time. And it's probably going to be a lot of hours just because we're having to review all this stuff all the time. And he goes, well, let's see how it goes. And so he would come in and he would be completely prepared for the lesson. He didn't take any more time than anybody else. And it was interesting. He just came so prepared that we didn't have to do a big review. We just did an instantaneous, oh, next lesson. I'd do the review of the lesson that we had just done. Okay, show me this, this, this. He would just do it and we would move on. So it was pretty exciting to have that. And I guess that's part of what's attracted me to aviation. Pacific Flying Club is different from other companies because it is a not-for-profit. So any monies that we make from flight training and from aircraft rental goes back into the aircraft, goes back into facilities. It's been around for over 50 years. It's got to be 60, 65 years now, somewhere in that neighborhood. We have 152s, 172s, so the P model 172s, which was sort of the last of what Cessna built in the 80s. And then we also have some R models, which were what they started to build in the 90s. And then we also have two SPs with the G1000, which is the glass cockpit aircraft. We've also upgraded a lot of our aircraft. All of our 172s, pretty much, I think I have one left to do, have the Garmin 650 in it and G5s, which replace some of the analog instruments on the dash. And it just makes them seem newer and nice as well. The P models have great useful load, and I think that's one of the big attractions to using them for flight training, is that you're not always worried about, do I fit within, can I go out and do air work today in this airplane, because it doesn't, it has to fit within a utility category. And if it doesn't, then we can't do the exercises that we want. So the newer airplanes are a little heavier out of the gate, so we run into the issue with those sometimes. But those ones are great, cross-country rental airplanes. We also have two Seneca 1s, and we've had them converted over. They have G500s, so sort of a version of the G1000, but it's a smaller screen. But it replaced a lot of the instrumentation in the aircraft with a single panel. So it just displays the attitude indicator, the airspeed indicators, all just appear on the screen. So it's nice. It's makes IFR instrument flying much easier. Makes it much nicer for the students. That whole situational awareness piece, which is really, really important all the time, but super important in IFR. You used to have to time. Okay, so I've been flying this long from this point, and you try to figure out, okay, so where am I on the chart? Nowadays, you can just look at the GPS and it will tell you exactly where you are. You can do a private pilot's license, and we do the commercial pilot license. And generally, from somebody does a private pilot license, they will turn around and do a night rating next, and a mountain checkout. And the mountain is really a familiarization with mountain flying. And so they'll do that, and then they'll do some cross countries, go some places. And if they decide that they want to become a commercial pilot, then they'll take the commercial pilot program. And we do have some people who just do it for, I just want to be better. And so they'll, they have a private pilot's license, done a bit of flying, they want to be better at this whole flying thing, they'll take a commercial program and, become a little bit better at it. From there, then the multi-engine, we do multi-engine training with the Senecas. And we do multi-IFR or single IFR as well. The biggest reason for a lot of people for night rating is not necessarily I want to go flying at night. I mean, that I think is beautiful, but for some people it's like, well, I don't necessarily want to go night flying, but I want to be able to come back from a trip and not have to worry about night. So that's one of the big advantages, and that's why a lot of people get a night rating, is so that when they're coming back from, Kelowna, and they're an hour late leaving, and they're coming into Boundary Bay and it's starting to get dark, they don't have to worry about, okay, I'm illegal now. They're still legal because they can fly at night. So there is currency to maintain for night flying. If you want to take passengers, you have to maintain currency. And most people will just pick a night and go and do their circuits. So when you're doing night training, it's in terms of the simple program, it's 5 hours of dual, 5 hours of solo, and you have to have a total of 10 hours of instrument training. So generally we'll start with doing some instrument training. We may do that in the day or at night. And then we'll get into some, we usually start with night circuits and learn how to take off and land at night, which is a little bit different. Sometimes the takeoff and landing at night actually makes the student better at day landings, because the only place to see, and I would always do my initial takeoffs and landings without the landing light, We do it here at Boundary Bay, so I'm not worried about, large animals running on the runway, but we do it without the landing light, and it really made the students focus where they were supposed to, where they're supposed to look when they're landing. And so what we'd find is that, I do those circuits with the students, and then from there I'd let them do some circuits, and then we'd go to another airport. So we'd maybe go to Pitt Meadows, do some circuits there, maybe over to Chilliwack, do a few circuits there, maybe Abbotsford, and then back to Boundary Bay. And again, then I would send them out to do this small cross country and some circuits. And then from there, we would do a long cross country, say to the Vancouver Island. So maybe up to Campbell River, and then down maybe Nanaimo and back home, that sort of, to give them a bit of navigating in less lit areas. We're looking at the forecasts for these trips, but sometimes the forecast doesn't exactly work. Or you get little micro weather systems where just in this one area is where there's some cloud or there's some rain or some snow happening, but nowhere else. So it can be interesting that way. And then we send the student out on that cross country as well, so that they can, again, some more experience. You can't go into the mountains at night because it's too hard to see the mountains. So you could, if you can fly far above them, but just to, fly from here to Kelowna at night, that wouldn't be a good idea. So locally, we have students, and right now we encourage the students that are working in the BCIT program, especially when they're doing their long cross countries, to do a bunch of them at night so that they'll meet some of the requirements for the airline transport rating. And I think everybody who's got a private pilot license should do a night rating. It truly does make you better at everything. We deliver training, and we deliver training in two sort of different programs. We deliver the program where you can just come in and learn how to fly, and it's sort of self-paced. So the real advantage of that program is I can go at the pace that I can A, afford, and B, fit into the rest of my life. We also do a program with BCIT, and BCIT, which is the British Columbia Institute of Technology, that program is 18 months now. And so you start from basically nothing, and you get your commercial and multi-engine and instrument rating in that program. The advantage of that program is there's a lot of, there's survival training, and there's a lot of aviation as a business. So there's a lot more in that program than there is in just coming in and learning how to fly. But it is an intense program. It's not for the faint of heart. You have to really be ready to actually do this. So your commitments in terms of having another job, or having a lot of outside commitments beyond the BCIT program, make that program really difficult. So sometimes people will find that it's too hard to balance their life and the BCIT program. But the people who are successful in it, the aviation industry wants them. And because we've had so many classes go through, a lot of senior pilots at companies are BCIT graduates. And so they'll go, oh, well, they came from the BCIT program, I want to hire them. Pacific Flying Club has its own maintenance facility, and we have 5 mechanics down in the shop right now, and we maintain the fleet of 29 aircraft. We don't do any outside right now because with our 29 aircraft and our 5 mechanics, we're pretty much maxed out, especially in the summer. And so what we find is having our own maintenance is advantageous because I can just call up and have the mechanics come and look at the airplane. So if a student says there's something wrong with the airplane, I have somebody just to come right away and take a look at that. So we have that advantage. And it's not the cost. I wouldn't say that it saves you money having your own maintenance, but it definitely has huge advantages in terms of fleet quality and all that sort of side of things, because they all know, my maintenance staff all know, that the expectation is that the planes will all be just so. And when people come here and they want to learn how to fly and they've flown someplace else, they do comment on the quality of the aircraft. We have 2 all-sims, which are amazing simulators. We just had purchased, our latest acquisition was the ALX, which is an all-sim product, and it simulates anything from a single engine, say 172, right up to an A320/320 Boeing 737. So it is a big span of what it can do. The great part about the new simulators is they fly like the airplane. So really, really important on a simulator to have great control loading. And that's really what gives you, the ability to use the simulator for emergencies, to use it for, doing things really that we probably shouldn't do in the airplane. We say we do, balanced landing recoveries in the aircraft. Well, if you truly did that, you'd probably bend a couple airplanes along the way. The students would not react appropriately and something would happen. So when you do it in the aircraft, you have to sort of do it. Whereas in the simulator, we can just let it happen. Whatever happens, happens, and the student will deal with that. And when they don't do it right, it's easy. I can just stop the simulator. It's not like I'm going to bend anything or hurt anybody. So there is a really huge advantage in simulation. So we use a lot of, even in the PPL, we do simulation early on with them, just in terms of not instrument flying, but just in terms of VFR exercises that would be, I can let the student, I can just let this naturally happen with the student. And the student, brings back the wrong engine and shuts it down. That's okay. In the simulator, in real life, you'd have to stop them right away. So there's a lot of learning that can happen when they do the wrong thing and you let it go to, to the end. And I had one student that I was doing multi-engine stuff with, and they just brought back, I essentially killed the right engine, and they essentially killed the left one. And so then we just now we have no power. And they're sitting there looking at me and they're trying to restart the engine that I killed. And I'm just like, I just let the plane crash. And I went, okay, so what's going on? But then it's easy. We just, we talk about it because we can stop the sim. I can talk about it. We can get things going again and we can do the exercise over again. So allowing that just to naturally progress to the end is a huge advantage in simulation. So we have that simulator, which is, like I say, does a whole range of aircraft. We also have an AL250, which does single engine and multi-engine. It's a more basic simulator. We don't use it for two crew stuff because we do a two crew program with the BCIT class, and we do that in the ALX. And a lot of their, instrument flying and stuff like that will all happen in the AL250. Again, great control loading system, so it feels like an airplane. It feels like the airplane. So if you switch models, the control loading is actually if the controls in the aircraft are actually naturally heavier, it's naturally heavier in the sim. So they actually have really worked that out well. And so we do a lot with that. And we also have a Redbird, and it's a full motion simulator. Its control loading isn't as good as the all-sim products, but people like it because it does move. So you'll have students that'll do some of their PPL training in that one as well. We could do like a familiarization flight in the simulator. Somebody could, want to learn how to, I just want to learn how to fly a little bit. I don't want to do it in the airplane because it's too expensive. I'll just do it in the simulator, and they could do that. Mostly what I do nowadays is I work with instructors to, do some standardization training, and I do flight tests for private and commercial students. And so that can be exciting, just in the fact that you're flying with somebody you've never flown with when you do a flight test. And you're hoping that they're going to do it right, and you have to be very alert and very aware. So it does make you sort of have to work a lot harder to actually do a test. Some people think, well, you just sit back and watch them. You have to be ready for them to do something wrong, and you have to be able to intervene and control that and correct it. I went to Duncan this summer to take my wife to visit some friends, and I'd never been to Duncan before. And Duncan's super short and super narrow, and on the edge of a gravel pit of all interesting things. So it was interesting. Like I said to my wife, I said, it made me actually have to work a little bit. Because it's, I land in 600 feet every day. So that wasn't the challenge, but the challenge is you got to clear the trees, you got a narrow runway, wind, turbulence, lots of different things going on. But it's also that thought, it's only, I can land in 600 feet all the time, but it was that thought of it's only 1,500 feet long. And so, of course, you know, I come down and I land, and of course I land in 600 feet again, and so now I have to taxi to the other end of the runway. So it was interesting from that standpoint, but it did make me sort of have to think about it. In terms of careers in aviation, you know, it's interesting because a lot of people will start from, I get my private pilot's license, I got a commercial pilot's license, I got an instructor rating, for example. And now they're working for NAV Canada as an air traffic controller. So it can be a real change in direction from where people started, because they suddenly, oh, hey, the ATC thing they're hiring, maybe I'd like to go and do that. You know, people always talk about the airlines, Air Canada, WestJet, Flair, you know, all these, you know, heavy metal aircraft. So everybody talks about that, but there's also so many other careers out there. I mean, there's, you know, flying a float plane, you know, firefighting, so water bombers and stuff like that is, you know, a couple other just really things that people don't necessarily think about.